So actually, yes, Scotty, I did understand economics, but I'm sure that you probably have some other reason for how I was never a capitalist libertarian now, won't you?
Your English isn't very good, is it? You did understand the economics. You did. You did. Do you understand what that word means, the word did? No wonder you can't grasp the English language with words such as prevent. That comes of no surprise. You said you did understand the economics. So what you're basically saying, what you're essentially saying is that you no longer understand the economics. You did understand the economics when you supported capitalism. So essentially, you've just shot yourself in the foot. It's just, that is laughable.
Oh, and Scott also asked me, how could you allocate resources effectively without money? Well, firstly, not all anarchists are against money. Some support markets, some support voucher systems.
Well, not all anarchists are against money. And I'm guessing you're referring to the socialists. And that alone itself is an oxymoron. This anarcho-socialism. Yes, that is an oxymoron. But that is besides the point. You're saying that some of them actually do support money. Money derives from capital. Where does all capital derive from? It derives from capitalism. Capitalism. You'd think the words in clear English, capitalism, would have given that little hint away. It's amazing. So what you're saying is that these so-called socialist anarchists support having money, but they require capitalism to give them it. Yeah, this is the reason why you cannot take your type seriously. It really is. It seriously is the very reason why you cannot take your type seriously. I mean, what sort of oxymoron is that? It's like, oh, I want money, but I hate capitalism. You honestly don't have a clue. That just proved it. As if the comment about, of course, supply and demand preventing scarcity wasn't bad enough. You can't even grasp that.
But to answer that, I'll give you the same type of response that I see all the time from libertarians. I don't know how it would be done.
You don't know how it would be done. Like other so-called libertarians, which of course you're putting into context, you're referring to the so-called libertarian socialists. You see, this is the point. You've just admitted there that you don't know. Like others, they don't know. So you don't know, you don't have a clue how you're going to allocate the scarce resources. And this is where we're going to move on to the issue to do with what economics is. And this will prove you don't have a clue what economics is. And it will prove you just don't understand the very basics of economics. Why? The reason why economics as a study exists, economics is not all about finances. It's not all about money. Economics is about our place on this earth. And it's a study as to how we can better improve our living standards on this earth whilst using the fewest resources as possible. Now, why is that? Why is it that we must use the fewest resources as possible? Because resources are scarce. And what does it mean by scarce resources? It simply means, and this is why economics exists. This is the whole purpose of why economics as a study exists. Why? Why does economics as a study exist? It exists because there's not enough resources to go around everyone. That's why we must economize. Economize. That's why economics exists. We must economize with scarce resources because there isn't enough to go around everyone. Therefore, you need an efficient system to allocate the scarce resources so that people are being provided the goods that they want. Why? Because if you can't, there's not enough resources to go around everyone. Now, this is the point you're about to make. You're about to speak about how you can make a system possible without money, without prices, where you can, allocate to everyone's needs. Bullshit. Because the whole purpose of why economics exists is because there isn't enough resources to go around everyone. That's why we must economize. Economize with scarce resources. We must economize as to how we can take the scarce resources, as there's not enough to go around everyone, to then allocate to the market efficiently so that we can better improve the living standards of the masses. Now, how do you do that without prices? And this is where you're going to make a fool out of yourself. Just listen to this.
But I know it would be far more moral to be in the hands of everyone and not just a small group of tyrants.
But you see, that's the whole point. You don't understand this. You can't grasp this. You can't have, all resources into the hands of the people. There isn't enough to go around everyone. That's the whole purpose of economics. That we must economize in order to provide for people efficiently. So in order to provide scarce resources to the market efficiently, how do you do that without prices? And your answer was, like the so-called libertarians, like the rest of them, you said they don't know, and you don't know. So how do you expect me to take you seriously? How do you expect anyone to take you seriously when you don't have the answer? You see, I can give you the answer. And the answer is in relation to prices.
And what we would have in a full free market. Business owners. And they possess all the power.
This is absolute nonsense. And the very fact that you said you understand economics is just beyond belief. You say that in a free market under a capitalist system, the businesses would hold all the power. What a load of nonsense. Capitalism is not pro-business. Capitalism is pro-consumer. Why? Let's say, for example, I produced a good. And let's say, for example, I set the price of the good. In other words, I was the one who set the value of the produce. And let's say I'm up against fierce competition. What's the problem? Let's say, for example, I set a certain product to suit my value. Just because I set my value doesn't mean to say the consumers are going to buy it. What happens if I set a value that I think is valuable, but the consumers don't think is valuable? What if the consumers don't see the value in that product? What if the consumers think the cost of the product is too high for what it's worth? You see, the underlying economic reality is value is not set by the business owner. Value is set by consumers' demand. In other words, it is what consumers are willing to pay for it. Otherwise, they're not going to buy your product. They'll simply go elsewhere and get it. It's that simple. You would lose out to your competition. It's what consumers see value as. It's what consumers are willing to pay for it. Let's say, for example, McDonald's upped their costs and put their burgers to £20 each. You think consumers are going to go to McDonald's after that? Are you having a laugh? They wouldn't. They would tell McDonald's to take a hike. They would go and strike on them. They would boycott the business. And that would make massive, massive losses on their company. So what's the company then forced to do? What's the business forced to do? The business is forced to abide by consumers' demand. So who is the real power? The real power is the consumer, because the consumer is the one demanding. And if the consumer does not get what they demand for, they will simply go next door and get it. And will their competition give the consumers what they want? Yes, their competition will, because competition always seeks to get the one over their other competitor. So in other words, if a business is going to up their costs and consumers don't value that, this is an opportunity for their competitor to step in, like such as Burger King, to lower their costs, to underbid their competition. And will the consumers go for it? Yes, they will. McDonald's would lose their competition to Burger King. You see, that's the whole point. Consumers' demand is what dictates. Consumers' demand is what determines value and cost and the success of a business. If a business harms their reputation, they're not going to do very well up against their competition. Reputation's a very important thing. And what's one of the most important things when you talk about reputation? Well, for example, why do people love Amazon.co.uk so much? Why do people love Amazon? They love Amazon because, you know, most of the time they get products relatively quick, and of course their costs are relatively cheap a lot of the times. So they know, consumers know, that they're getting, you know, decent value, good products, and, you know, most of the time a quick delivery service. And of course they know from the reputation that, you know, there's cheaper costs. This all plays part of the reputation of a business. That's all driven by consumers' demand. Now, I went to college doing travel and tourism because, you know, I thought, you know, it's something I'd be interested in doing. I wasn't really so much interested in the money, etc. And I done marketing as part of the subject. Part of the course was marketing. And of course, funny enough, even though I was only in an NQ level, which is basic level, you know, travel and tourism that I had done, I never progressed because it's just something that, of course, I just didn't. Anyway, I went in and I sat my, it wasn't an exam, it was an assessment on marketing and to do the research and all the rest of it. And my lecturer said that my work on marketing was better than most of HN Year 2 students. Do you know what HN Year 2 students are? You've got your NQ, which is the level I was in, and then you have your HN Year 1, and then your HN Year 2. In other words, your HN Year 2 is the HND. That's your top level in college. There you go. My work was better than most of the HN Year 2 students. You know, you want to know what marketing's all about. What marketing's in relation to. Marketing plays an important role, especially with regards to consumers. Especially with regards to how businesses research into other competitors to see what they're doing and getting positive and negative feedback, all these important things, because the consumer is the primary element. The consumer is the most important, element to any business. So capitalism is not pro-business, it's pro-consumer. And the fact that you don't understand that proves to me why me, who done an NQ, got better results than most HN Year 2 students. It proves to me you've never done a marketing or business course in your life. Why? Because you don't understand how important the consumer is. Do you honestly think that in this utopia, living inside your head, do you honestly believe a business can just get away with abusing customers and somehow they'll be a fantastic, great success? Is that honestly what you believe? That in a free market, in a fiercely competitive free market economy, businesses would just get away with abusing their customers? Would they really? Would they really? Although not a free market, we saw an example of Marks and Spencer's. Marks and Spencer's tried to refuse Muslims selling, alcohol to consumers. And what did the consumers do? The consumers threatened to boycott the business. And what did Marks and Spencer's do? They done a 180 turn. Excuse me. They done a 180 turn. But that's it. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You don't understand anything. You've got no credibility. You've got none. Okay, that's it. You have no credibility. You don't even understand the importance of the consumer. You have this in your head that somehow businesses are somehow, under a capitalist system, more important than of course, consumers. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense.